What if the strongest thing she feels from you happens after you've completely disappeared? Most people believe that if you stop calling, stop texting, and stop showing up, she'll simply forget you. They assume that out of sight means out of mind. But human emotions rarely work that way. In fact, when a connection has been meaningful, silence often speaks louder than constant communication. The absence of someone who once mattered doesn't always erase their presence, it often amplifies it. Think about it for a moment. When you hear the same song every single day, eventually it becomes background noise. But when that song suddenly disappears for months and then randomly plays again, every memory attached to it comes rushing back. Relationships work in a similar way. Constant availability can become expected, but genuine absence creates awareness. That's why chasing often weakens attraction while calm distance strengthens it. When you were always reaching out, always checking in, always making yourself available, she never had the opportunity to experience what life felt like without your energy. Your attention became predictable, it was always there. And the human mind has a strange habit. It rarely appreciates what it believes will never leave. But the moment you stop chasing, not out of anger, not to punish her, but because you've chosen to focus on yourself, the emotional environment changes. Suddenly there's space, and in that space, her mind begins filling the silence with questions. She starts remembering the conversations you had, the laughs you shared, the way you listened when no one else did, the comfort of your presence. None of this happens because you reminded her. It happens because your absence gave those memories room to surface naturally. That's the psychology most people never understand. The mind constantly compares the present with the past. If your presence brought peace, excitement, stability, or emotional connection, your absence highlights those qualities even more. She may be busy with work, friends, or daily life, but unexpected moments, a familiar place, a certain song, a quiet evening, can suddenly remind her of you, not because you texted her, not because you begged for another chance, but because emotional memories don't disappear on command. The biggest mistake men make is believing they need to constantly stay in front of her to remain important. In reality, importance is created by emotional impact, not by frequency of contact. Someone who leaves a genuine impression can remain in another person's mind long after the conversation ends. This is why emotional self control is so powerful. When you stop trying to force connection, you allow your previous connection to speak for itself. Instead of overwhelming her with more messages, you give her mind the opportunity to miss what is no longer there. And here's where many people get it wrong. They use silence as a strategy while secretly hoping every minute that she'll reach out. But real strength comes when your silence isn't a performance. It's the natural result of choosing your own growth, your own peace, and your own purpose over chasing an outcome. That kind of energy is impossible to fake. People can sense when you've genuinely moved your attention back to your own life. Your confidence becomes quieter, your emotions become steadier, your value is no longer based on someone else's response. Ironically, that's often when your presence becomes strongest. Because while you're busy building your future, she may begin feeling the weight of your absence in ways she never expected. Sometimes the loudest message you'll ever send is the peace you found without saying a single word. One of the most powerful shifts in any relationship happens the moment you stop trying to control how she feels about you. It sounds simple, but very few people ever reach this point. Most spend their time wondering, why isn't she texted? Is she thinking about me? What can I do to make her miss me? Those questions keep your attention locked on her, and the more your life revolves around her reactions, the less attractive your energy becomes, but everything begins to change the moment you emotionally detach from the outcome. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring about someone. It means you stop allowing their choices to determine your peace of mind. You no longer wake up expecting a message. You no longer check your phone every few minutes hoping her name appears. You stop replaying old conversations in your head, searching for hidden meanings. Instead, you quietly return your attention to the one person you actually have control over, yourself. That shift is more powerful than most people realize because when your emotional energy is no longer chasing her, it naturally becomes calmer. Your decisions become clearer. Your conversations become more genuine. You stop acting from fear and start acting from confidence. And even without direct communication, that change has a ripple effect. Why? Because certainty disappears Before, she knew exactly where you stood. She knew that if she waited long enough, you'd probably reach out. She knew you'd react to every change in her behavior. There was no mystery because your actions were predictable. Now that's gone. Instead of constantly appearing in her notifications, you've disappeared into your own life. Instead of explaining yourself, you're simply living. Instead of trying to convince her of your value, you're investing in becoming more valuable. And uncertainty begins to replace certainty. Human psychology is fascinating. When people fully understand a situation, they stop thinking about it. But when something suddenly becomes unclear, the mind naturally searches for answers. Questions begin to form. What changed? Why isn't he reacting anymore? Is he happier without me? Has he finally moved on? Those questions don't appear because you manipulated her. They appear because your behavior changed in a healthy, authentic way. The familiar pattern she expected is no longer there, so her curiosity starts doing what your words never could. Curiosity is one of the strongest emotional forces in attraction. When someone can't completely figure you out anymore, they begin paying closer attention. They notice things they once overlooked. They replay memories. They compare the version of you they knew with the person you've become. And the more grounded you are, the stronger that contrast becomes. This is why emotional detachment is never about pretending not to care. It's about caring more about your own growth than controlling someone else's emotions. You're no longer trying to force connection. You're allowing life to unfold naturally while continuing to build a future that excites you with or without her. Ironically, that's often when she begins to feel your presence the most. Not because you're demanding her attention, but because you've stopped demanding anything at all. And sometimes the strongest attraction begins the moment your peace becomes more important than being noticed. The most powerful transformation you'll ever make isn't the one she hears about, it's the one she feels without you saying a single word. Most people believe that if they disappear, they become invisible. They think that if they're not constantly posting, texting, calling, or reminding someone they exist, they'll slowly be forgotten. But that's not how real attraction works. Attraction isn't sustained by constant attention, it is sustained by growth, emotional impact, and the way someone makes another person feel. When you begin improving yourself, even in complete silence, something changes that words could never accomplish. Think about who you were when you were constantly chasing. Your days revolved around getting a reply, your confidence rose and fell depending on her mood, your happiness depended on whether she noticed you. Without realizing it, you weren't building yourself, you were building your life around someone else's approval. But one day, something clicks, you stop asking, how can I make her want me? And you begin asking, how can I become someone I'm proud to be? That single question changes everything. Instead of spending hours thinking about her, you spend those hours improving your health. You begin exercising consistently. You learn new skills. You work harder on your career. You spend more time with people who genuinely support you. You develop discipline. You read more. You become emotionally stronger because your focus has shifted from seeking validation to creating value. And here's the interesting part, you didn't do any of this to impress her. You did it because you finally understood that your greatest investment should always be yourself. That authenticity is impossible to fake. People can sense when growth is real. Confidence built through discipline carries a completely different energy than confidence built through attention. One depends on applause, the other exists even in complete silence. Eventually, she begins noticing the difference. Maybe she hears from mutual friends that you're doing well. Maybe she sees a glimpse of your life online. Maybe she simply notices that you're no longer trying to pull her back into your world. Whatever the reason, she begins comparing two versions of you, the man who once chased and the man who no longer needs to. That comparison creates something powerful because now she realizes your absence wasn't caused by defeat, it was caused by growth. She starts wondering what changed. How did the man who once seemed emotionally dependent become so calm? Why does he seem happier without trying to prove anything? Why does he look more confident without asking for anyone's approval? Those questions begin changing the way she remembers you. Your value rises because your life rises. People naturally admire those who are moving forward with purpose. They respect those who continue growing, regardless of who's watching. Real confidence isn't loud, it doesn't demand recognition. It quietly speaks through your habits, your discipline, and your peace of mind. And the greatest irony is this: the more you become focused on creating a meaningful life, the less concerned you become about whether she notices. Ironically, that's often the exact moment she finally does, because your presence is no longer tied to communication, it's tied to the man you've become. She doesn't just remember your words anymore, she feels the difference between the version of you she once knew and the version she'll never be able to forget. And that's the kind of presence that distance can never erase. Sometimes the strongest emotions don't appear while two people are constantly talking. They appear after the conversations stop, when the noise disappears and all that's left are memories. When you're in constant contact with someone, the mind is occupied with the present. Every new message replaces the previous one. Every conversation pushes older moments further into the background. There is little time to reflect because something new is always happening. But silence changes everything. The moment communication ends, the mind no longer has new experiences to focus on. Instead, it begins searching through old ones. It replays conversations, shared laughter, meaningful moments, and the emotions attached to them. It doesn't do this because someone forced it to. It does it because that's how human memory works. Distance creates room for reflection. If the connection you shared carried genuine meaning, that meaning doesn't disappear overnight. In fact, the absence of new interactions often makes the old ones feel even more significant. She might remember a place you visited together, a joke only the two of you understood, or a moment when you made her feel safe during a difficult time. These memories don't arrive on a schedule, they appear unexpectedly: a familiar song, a favorite restaurant, a quiet drive home, a rainy afternoon. Suddenly, something reminds her of you, and for a brief moment, it feels as if you're standing right beside her, even though there hasn't been a single message between you for weeks or even months. That's the power of emotional association. The human mind connects people with feelings, places, sounds, and experiences. Once those connections are created, they're difficult to erase. They don't require constant communication to survive. They simply wait for the right trigger to bring them back into awareness. This is why trying to constantly remind someone you exist often has the opposite effect. When you're always trying to create new memories, you leave no room for the old ones to become valuable. But when you step away and allow space to exist, the memories begin working on their own. She starts comparing her present experiences with the emotional connection she once had. Maybe someone else makes her laugh, but it doesn't feel quite the same. Maybe life continues as normal, yet something feels missing. Not because you're perfect, but because your presence became part of meaningful moments that can't simply be replaced. The mistake many men make is believing they need to keep talking to remain unforgettable. In reality, people remember how you made them feel far longer than they remember the exact words you said. If your presence brought peace, encouragement, confidence, or genuine understanding, those emotions become attached to your memory. And memories connected to strong emotions have a way of returning when least expected. That's why real influence doesn't come from chasing attention, it comes from creating moments that leave a lasting emotional imprint. As you continue focusing on your own journey, those memories quietly grow stronger because they aren't being interrupted by desperation or emotional drama. They're allowed to settle into something deeper: respect, appreciation, and reflection. And sometimes the greatest reminder of your value isn't another conversation, it's the silence that gives her memories room to speak. The greatest power you'll ever have isn't found in saying the perfect words or making the perfect move. It's found in becoming so emotionally steady that your presence is felt even when you're nowhere around. Most people confuse confidence with being loud. They think confidence is about proving yourself, winning every argument, showing off your success, or constantly reminding others of your value. But real confidence is much quieter than that. It doesn't ask for attention, it doesn't chase recognition, it simply exists. And that's exactly why it becomes unforgettable. Think about the people you've respected most in your life. Chances are they weren't the ones constantly demanding validation. They were calm under pressure. They stayed composed when others became emotional. They knew who they were, even when no one applauded them. That kind of emotional stability leaves a lasting impression. The same principle applies in relationships. When your emotions constantly rise and fall based on her behavior, she can predict you. If she pulls away, you panic. If she replies, you're excited. If she seems distant, you immediately try to fix everything. Without realizing it, you're allowing someone else's emotions to control your own. But one day, that cycle ends. You stop reacting to every small change. You stop interpreting every delayed message as a disaster. You stop allowing uncertainty to steal your peace. Instead, you develop something much more attractive, a calm confidence that comes from knowing your worth regardless of what anyone else chooses. That kind of confidence cannot be taught with words alone, it has to be lived. And when you begin living that way, something fascinating happens. Even without contacting her, she begins to sense the difference. Not because you've sent her a message, not because you've tried to make her jealous, but because your entire energy has changed. You're no longer operating from fear, you're operating from peace. She remembers the man who constantly needed reassurance. Now she imagines someone who seems completely comfortable with himself. That contrast creates emotional curiosity because people naturally notice genuine transformation. Your calm becomes louder than your conversations ever were. She starts wondering if you've truly moved on. She wonders what changed inside you. She questions why the emotional reactions she once expected never came, and those unanswered questions quietly pull her attention back toward you because emotional certainty has disappeared. The interesting thing about calm confidence is that it doesn't create pressure, it creates safety. People are naturally drawn toward those who are emotionally stable because stability is rare. In a world where everyone is reacting, arguing, chasing approval, and seeking constant attention, the person who remains centered stands out without trying. That's why your presence can still be felt without contact, not because of magic, not because of some hidden technique, but because genuine self respect leaves an emotional imprint that doesn't disappear when communication ends. You've become someone whose value isn't measured by how often you're seen, but by how deeply you're remembered. And the more you protect your peace, the stronger that invisible presence becomes. She may not hear your voice, she may not read your messages, she may not see you every day, but she'll remember how your calm made her feel. Because true confidence doesn't travel through words, it travels through the lasting impact of the person you've become. And that's the kind of presence that silence can never erase. After everything we've talked about, silence, emotional detachment, self improvement, memories, and quiet confidence, it all comes down to one final truth. Your presence is never measured by how often someone hears from you, it's measured by the impact you leave behind. That's what people remember. Not every conversation, not every text message, not every small interaction. They remember how you made them feel. Think about the people who have influenced your own life. You probably can't remember every word they ever said, but you remember the confidence they inspired, the peace they brought, the encouragement they gave, or the way they made you believe in yourself. That's because emotions stay long after details fade. Relationships work the same way. If your connection was built only on constant communication, then silence can make it disappear. But if your connection was built on genuine respect, emotional consistency, shared experiences, and authentic character, then your presence continues long after the conversation ends. That's why chasing is so often unnecessary. When you constantly try to remind someone of your value, you're actually suggesting that your value needs constant explanation. But true value doesn't need to be advertised every day. It naturally reveals itself over time. Imagine planting a tree. You don't dig it up every morning to check if it's growing. You water it, you give it sunlight, then you allow time to do its work. Personal growth is no different when you invest in your discipline, your health, your purpose, your emotional maturity, and your character. You're planting seeds that continue growing whether anyone is watching or not. Eventually, people notice the results, including her. She may remember the way you remained respectful during difficult moments. She may remember your calm when others became emotional. She may remember the conversations that made her feel understood. She may remember the standards you quietly lived by instead of constantly talking about. Those things become part of the emotional picture she carries with her, and that's why your presence can still be felt. Not because you're trying to occupy her thoughts, but because your character created a lasting impression. There's an important lesson hidden in all of this. Never build your life around becoming unforgettable to someone else. Build your life around becoming unforgettable to yourself. Become the kind of man who keeps his promises, who continues growing when nobody is watching, who protects his peace instead of chasing approval, who treats people with respect but never abandons his own standards. When you become that man, something incredible happens. Whether she returns or not stops becoming the most important question. Because you've already gained something much more valuable, you've gained yourself. And once you stop looking for your identity in another person's attention, your confidence becomes permanent instead of temporary. Ironically, that's often when others begin recognizing your value the most. Not because you're demanding recognition, but because your life quietly reflects it. Your presence no longer depends on constant contact, it lives in your character. It lives in your consistency. It lives in the way people feel after they've known you. And that's something distance, silence, or time can never truly take away, because the strongest presence isn't created by staying in someone's inbox. It's created by becoming someone they'll never forget.